Emily Dawson and Ryan Carter had once been the golden couple of Willow Creek cheerleader and football star, admired by everyone, untouchable in their small-town spotlight. But behind their perfect smiles, a secret was brewing, one that would shatter their lives and leave a newborn baby at the center of a chilling investigation. Emily Dawson had always been the kind of girl people couldn't stop talking about. In a town as small as Willow Creek, where life often moved at the slow pace of its winding streets, Emily's presence was electric. She was the kind of teenager that parents pointed to as an example, the girl whose future seemed untouchable. With her long golden hair, bright green eyes, and that famous cheerleader smile, Emily appeared to live in a world untouched by problems. She was crowned homecoming queen in her senior year, a title that everyone assumed was her destiny. When Emily led the cheer squad onto the field, the crowd erupted with pride. She thrived in the attention, or at least that's what everyone believed. But perfection has a way of demanding more than it gives. Behind her sparkling reputation, Emily carried a quiet burden that no one seemed to notice. After graduation, the spotlight that once defined her began to dim. Emily enrolled at a nearby community college, but she didn't seem to chase the future everyone had expected. While her friends moved away to universities and jobs in bigger cities, she stayed behind. At first, people assumed she was just finding her footing, adjusting to life outside of high school. But whispers grew louder when neighbors noticed she rarely left her house. The girl who had once been the face of pep rallies now seemed like a shadow of herself. The Dawson family home sat on a quiet street, its porch light glowing at night as though to ward off questions. Emily's mother insisted her daughter was focused on her studies, but few ever saw her around town. She skipped parties, avoided reunions, and never appeared in the coffee shops where her peers gathered to reminisce. Old classmates scrolled through her social media accounts, but even there, the once steady stream of smiling photos had slowed to nothing. It was as if she had vanished into the walls of her home. For those who had idolized her, it didn't make sense. How could someone so full of life, so eager to shine, suddenly retreat into silence? Theories circulated. Some thought she was overwhelmed by expectations, unable to live up to the picture-perfect identity the town had painted for her. Others whispered about a heartbreak, recalling her high school relationship with Ryan Carter, the football player who left town for better opportunities. Whatever the reason, Willow Creek agreed on one thing: something was different about Emily Dawson. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but slowly the perfect girl everyone thought they knew seemed to be hiding. Nobody could have predicted just how heavy the secret she carried truly was, or how the golden crown she once wore would soon turn into the weight of a scandal that shook the entire town. The morning was cold, the kind of crisp autumn day where the air felt like it could snap if you weren't careful. Police cars gathered behind the small gas station at the edge of Willow Creek, their lights flashing silently in the dawn. A local janitor had discovered something unusual near an old, abandoned shed tucked behind the pumps. At first, he thought it was a discarded bundle of clothes, the kind of thing that often ended up behind forgotten buildings. But as he drew closer, the truth hit him with a force that left him shaking. Wrapped in a faded blanket, a newborn baby lay lifeless, its tiny body still and pale in the early light. News spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. The quiet town, where the loudest disturbances were usually barking dogs or a teenage prank, suddenly found itself gripped by horror and confusion. How could such a tragedy occur here, in a place where everyone knew each other? Investigators immediately secured the scene, treating it with the meticulous care of professionals who understood that every detail might hold a clue. The blanket, the shed, the dirt stains on the wooden floor, they were all pieces of a puzzle that no one wanted to exist. Forensic teams moved in, documenting every angle, every footprint, every discarded scrap that might tell the story of the baby's final moments. The child, they discovered, had been born very recently, likely within the last few days. There was no sign of foul play beyond the abandonment itself, no injuries that suggested a struggle. But the questions that hovered over the case were impossible to ignore. Who was the mother? Why had she left the baby in such a lonely, exposed place? And had anyone else been involved or even noticed what happened? Detectives began canvassing the town, asking questions that unsettled many of Willow Creek's residents. Hospitals and clinics were checked for records, pharmacists were questioned about prenatal medications, and local schools were subtly asked about any signs of pregnancy among students or recent graduates. Yet every lead seemed to vanish, every avenue of inquiry ended at a dead end. People whispered to one another, wondering who could be responsible, each conversation a mixture of suspicion and fear. As the days passed, the investigation intensified. Officers revisited the shed multiple times, scanning it for fingerprints, hair samples, and anything else that might connect the baby to its mother. The community watched from a distance, torn between morbid curiosity and grief. Vigils were held for the child, small candles flickering in front yards and along the streets, yet no one knew who to mourn. The town felt trapped between sorrow and suspicion, a sense of unease settling like a fog over familiar places. Despite the careful work of the police, leads continued to dry up. Each morning brought fresh hope that a clue would surface, yet each evening ended with the same lingering questions. Residents began noticing who was missing from their usual routines, scanning faces for any hint of guilt. Rumors began to weave their way through the town, each one more intense than the last. The shed behind the gas station had become a symbol of fear and mystery, a place that no one dared approach without a heavy heart. And in the midst of all this, the mother remained invisible, a shadow whose actions had changed the town forever. Months passed after the discovery of the baby, and the investigation seemed to stall. Willow Creek had a way of forgetting tragedies if they weren't solved quickly, but the memory of that small, lifeless body stayed with the town's people. Police files grew thick with notes, fingerprints, and witness statements, yet none led to a solid breakthrough. Detectives knew that the key to solving the case likely rested in science rather than sightings or rumors. Advances in DNA technology had solved cold cases across the country, and the team hoped it could finally point them toward answers. The department quietly began requesting voluntary DNA samples from people connected to the case or who might be linked to the town's young adult population at the time of the birth. These requests were subtle, framed as part of routine community cooperation. Some residents ignored the letters, some refused, but a few complied, offering their genetic material in hopes that the case could be solved. Among those who submitted was Ryan Carter, Emily Dawson's high school boyfriend. Ryan had left Willow Creek years earlier, pursuing work in another state. But when police reached out to him, he agreed to provide a sample without hesitation. He never suspected his involvement would extend beyond the simple act of helping authorities. Weeks went by as labs processed the samples. Technicians worked meticulously, comparing genetic markers, looking for a match that would tie the baby to a parent. The process was slow, and every day without results added pressure to the detectives and the community alike. Then the call came. The DNA analysis had produced a surprising outcome. Ryan Carter was not the father of the baby, but his sample had an unexpected connection to the child. The genetic profile pointed toward the baby's mother, revealing a link that narrowed the investigation in a way nothing else had. This discovery shifted the case entirely. Detectives now had a target, someone whose identity had been hidden behind months of unanswered questions. The revelation left investigators both relieved and concerned. The mother was someone close to the town, someone who had managed to keep her pregnancy completely secret, yet her DNA now tied her irrevocably to the tragedy. The breakthrough opened new avenues for questioning, surveillance, and gathering further evidence. The town of Willow Creek, meanwhile, remained unaware of the specifics life went on around the investigation, but police work moved forward with quiet urgency. Officers retraced known connections, studied past interactions, and slowly reconstructed the networks of people who might have intersected with the mother. The DNA evidence became the linchpin of the case, transforming what had been months of dead ends into a path that could finally lead to answers. Ryan, caught in the middle of this unexpected twist, became an unintentional key to unlocking the truth. His cooperation had set in motion the chain of events that would eventually reveal the mother, reshaping the investigation entirely. What had started as a routine request for assistance had grown into a pivotal moment, one that would soon expose secrets the town had never imagined. The tiny strand of genetic material had done what months of searching could not, pointing the way toward a revelation that would shake Willow Creek to its core. The DNA trail led detectives straight to Emily Dawson, the girl who had once been Willow Creek's shining star. When officers arrived at her modest home on the outskirts of town, they were met with silence. Emily, who had managed to remain invisible for so long, now faced evidence she could not escape. Her name, once synonymous with cheerleading trophies and homecoming titles, was now at the center of a tragedy that had captured the town's attention and grief. For years, Emily had carefully maintained the image of perfection. She had smiled for the cameras, participated in school events, and celebrated milestones that everyone admired. Yet beneath the surface, she had been hiding a secret that weighed heavier than any crown or accolade. The pregnancy had begun quietly, without anyone noticing, and she had kept it that way, fearing judgment, gossip, and the shame of disappointing the town she once dazzled. The thought of facing anyone, family, friends, or neighbors was unbearable, and she had convinced herself she could handle it alone. As detectives pieced together the events leading up to the tragedy, a picture emerged of a young woman isolated by fear. Emily had given birth alone, in the quiet of her home, without medical assistance or the knowledge of those around her. Something went wrong, as it often does in cases where support is absent. Faced with a situation she could not control, panic took over. Instead of seeking help, she made the devastating decision to leave the newborn in the abandoned shed behind the gas station, believing that hiding the child might somehow protect her from the judgment she feared. The investigation revealed how carefully she had concealed her pregnancy. Her clothing had shifted, she had avoided social gatherings, and she had created a life that appeared normal on the surface while hiding an entirely separate reality. For months, she had moved through the world with a mask of composure, while detectives struggled to connect the dots. DNA, however, left no room for concealment. The evidence was undeniable, tracing the baby directly back to her and leaving investigators with a clear understanding of what had occurred. The revelation stunned Willow Creek. Residents who had once cheered for Emily, who had admired her success and grace, were forced to confront the reality of the secret she had carried. The story of the beauty queen cheerleader transformed into a cautionary tale of fear, isolation, and tragic choices. Emily's life, once filled with promise and admiration, now stood in stark contrast to the small, lifeless body that had been found in the shed. The case shifted from mystery to tragedy, from speculation to certainty. Emily Dawson, the girl who had been the pride of Willow Creek, was now the mother whose fear and desperation had led to a heartbreaking outcome. The investigation had uncovered the truth, and the town began to grapple with the weight of it. What had been hidden for months was finally exposed, leaving a mark on the community and on the life of the young woman who had once been untouchable. Emily Dawson's arrest marked a turning point for Willow Creek. The quiet town that had once celebrated her smile and accomplishments was now consumed with the shock of her secret. News crews arrived from nearby cities, their cameras capturing the streets, the school hallways, and the Dawson family home. Reporters documented every detail, piecing together the narrative that had transformed a hometown hero into the center of a tragic investigation. The once pristine image of Emily as the golden girl of Willow Creek was shattered, leaving behind a complicated story that no one could ignore. In court, the proceedings were tense and emotionally charged. Spectators filled the room, many of them former classmates, teachers, and neighbors, all seeking answers. The case was difficult for them to understand. The juxtaposition of Emily's past charm and her present actions creating a sense of disbelief. Prosecutors laid out the evidence carefully, explaining how months of careful concealment combined with the desperate decisions of a frightened young woman had led to the baby being abandoned. DNA evidence, timelines, and witness statements all painted a detailed picture of what had occurred, leaving little room for doubt about Emily's role in the tragedy. Ryan Carter's involvement, once thought to be minor, had become a crucial turning point in the investigation. By voluntarily submitting his DNA, he had inadvertently provided the link that led investigators directly to Emily, while he had not been responsible for the events. His cooperation underscored the ways in which small actions could have far-reaching consequences. The town, too, struggled to reconcile his role in the unfolding story, recognizing that the tragedy could have remained unsolved without his contribution. The fallout extended beyond the courtroom. Families whispered about responsibility, secrecy, and the pressures placed on young people to maintain appearances. Willow Creek, a town that prided itself on community values, began to confront uncomfortable truths about judgment, isolation, and the hidden struggles of its residents. Conversations that had once been polite and surface level now delved into topics people had avoided for years: mental health, social pressure, and the quiet desperation that can grow behind closed doors. The case became a lens through which the community examined itself, and many realized that Emily's situation, while extreme, was a symptom of broader issues that had gone unnoticed. Emily's story also became a cautionary tale about the power of secrecy and the tragic consequences of fear. The young woman who had once been the town's pride had faced a reality she felt incapable of sharing, and in her isolation, she made choices that would haunt her and the community forever. The narrative of the beauty queen cheerleader was no longer about trophies, smiles, or public admiration. It was about the dangers of hiding one's struggles, the ways in which fear can dictate actions, and the ripple effects that a single desperate decision can create. Even after the legal proceedings concluded, the impact of the case lingered in Willow Creek. Parents, teachers, and peers reflected on what they could have done differently, while Emily's story remained a reminder of the fragility of appearances. The tragedy reshaped the town's understanding of innocence, responsibility, and consequence. What began as a story about a perfect young woman ended as a complex tale of secrecy, loss, and the stark realities hidden behind the smiles of a small town.